All right, welcome to Bet the Edge. I'm Jay Croucher here, as always, with Drew Dinsick. Today, Drew, we're going to talk Cardinals at a suddenly vaguely compelling Pittsburgh Steelers team. Panthers at Bucs. Bucks, no, not much going on there, but there are some angles into that game, I think. And then Broncos at Texans, which suddenly, it was so good that they literally flexed the game out of the 4 p.m. window because they didn't want to distract from Niners Eagles. So we'll
Yeah.
get to that one last. But let's start off with your Pittsburgh Steelers, who are 5.5-point favorites home to the Cardinals.
Mhm.
Total is 41. How real do you think the Steelers' offense is after what they showed against Cincy?
This is a tough question. What they showed us against Cincy didn't really, on the rewatch, didn't really feel all that different than Matt Canada's offense. There's still sort of structural issues where it's relatively predictable when they're when it's a drop back, the areas of the field that Kenny Pickett is able to target or willing to target or interested in targeting, or where they're drawing up plays for the wide receivers, are relatively predictable for coverage. And the only kind of wrinkle that was a little bit different in that game from a lot of the other Kenny Pickett we've seen in 2023 so far is that he targeted Pat Freiermuth 11 times, which is a lot. And that to me at least is a bit of a potential to change things and give break open opportunities for at least kind of creating space in the middle, all around boundaries where Pickett wants to work with his wide receivers if there is some threat over the middle. So that's about the only real I can give you. What I can tell you is that just in general, the Steelers have been playing better offensively. 3 of their 4 best games of the season, or 3 of their 3 best games of the season, were 3 of the last 4 weeks, week 9, week 10, and this last week against Cincinnati. And, it's not really to say that the Titans and the Packers defenses are pushovers. The one, negative game they had was against the mighty Cleveland Browns at full strength, so on the road. And so I think if you take this relatively small sample of what we've seen from the Steelers recently and you carry it forward, it's kind of good by today's NFL offensive standards. And I think that is pretty important against a Cardinals defense that has made bad offenses at times look very good this season. And so this is a pretty interesting opportunity for the Steelers to continue their winning. And I think even more than that, what was evident in the Steelers' performance in getting to 400 yards last week, the firing of Matt Canada did do one thing pretty clearly, and that is send a message to everybody on the offense, and just in terms of level of effort they were giving, because it felt like the Steelers played very hard. Like, they left a lot of points on the field. There were some unfortunate turnovers. There was a lack of effort at times. I'm looking squarely at Deontay Johnson, who did not even go to recover a fumble that was bouncing around in front of him. But overall, I thought, the Steelers offense showed you that they're at a minimum league average right now. And at full strength, offensive line is doing a decent job. Running game certainly is providing that complementary push to kind of, you can't necessarily entirely key on the pass. So I think there's a decent chance here that the Steelers have one of their better offensive outputs of the season against the Cardinals defense that really not playing for much. And then, Cardinals offense was very unimpressive last week against the Rams at home. Could have been a stinker, could be just issues that Cardinals have schematically matching up against anyone in division. But I think Steelers defense, certainly is strong enough and is dynamic enough to really give Kyler Murray some difficulty here. If I had to play this game at current price, there's a premium already on the Steelers, largely because people have lost faith in the Cardinals after last week's performance. But one play and one play only, weather permitting, I would look for an over 41 here, because, Kyler Murray scrambling around could give the Steelers a little bit of trouble on the ground. And while the running game's not going to get much going against the Steelers defense up the middle of the field, they definitely could work outside tackle. So I would expect this one probably should be in the 43 range. And again, we'll be watching weather carefully here to see if this is a bet to the over.
Yeah, I think with the Steelers, you have to opponent adjust a fair bit for just how insipid the Bengals defense is, particularly without Cam Taylor-Britt, which hurt them. And the defense has been trending the wrong way for a while now. But I do think a couple of things. One, Pickett's average depth of target was 8.5 yards. That's above average for an offense that had been incredibly lacking in explosiveness and verticality. And then 2, I think one sneaky thing about the Steelers season is that Deontay Johnson was out for a long time. Pat Fryermuth was out for a long time. When they have Johnson, Fryermuth, and Pickens, now you have three legitimate weapons in the passing game. Like, Fryermuth is really good. He's been a top 10 tight end by PFF grade the past 2 years. Seems like he's healthy, and he gives them that middle of the field that they haven't had previously. And so, I mean, there are reasons to believe that Kenny Pickett can be good. Like, he was decent at the end of his rookie season. He has been terrible this year until the past month, but I think there are reasons to believe that he may have turned the corner. Also, their rushing attack now, all of a sudden, after I think back to that week 2 game against Cleveland, where it was just comical, the lack of push that they were getting. Najee Harris just running into the line for 1 yard losses against Myles Garrett and co. And now they're able to run the ball. They've been really good running the ball for almost a couple of months now. So that helps. And then on the defensive side, Minkah Fitzpatrick is expected back at practice. I think when that defense is fully loaded, they're an above average defense. They're not elite, but they're hovering around that, edge of the top 10, I think. And if you pair that with what should approach an average offense, then all of a sudden you're looking at a halfway decent team. Won't beat on the drum again, but I think if you like the Steelers in this game and you're bullish on the Steelers, the best way to bet them is to bet on Tomlin for Coach of the Year, which is still 16-1. I make them 5-1 fair to win the division, which you might think is like ridiculous because Baltimore's in that division. Like, look at Pittsburgh's schedule. Considering what they did against Cincinnati, and maybe they won't do it against the real defense, well, it doesn't really matter because they play Arizona, New England, at Indy, and then home to Cincinnati again the next month. And then they close at Seattle and at Baltimore, and that's probably where they lose the division. But, I make it a 20% chance, and if they're a 20% chance to win the division, then Mike Tomlin is more than a 6% chance to win Coach of the Year if you're looking at that 16-1. Quickly on the Cardinals side, I thought it was just kind of glaring exactly how bad their defense was against the Rams, where they just seemed to have no strength whatsoever, where the Rams were, with Kyren Williams just running all over them. Stafford was getting whatever he wanted through the air and didn't really have to throw the second half. I mean, exactly, is this the worst defense in the league? Where do you think this stands?
They're bottom 3. Yeah, they deserve consideration with the likes of the Chargers and the Lions. And, I don't think I had any of those 3 teams really kind of keyed to be this poor this season. But there were, I think, 5 games this year where the Cardinals defense just truly no-showed. The first one that I recall was the one against Cincinnati, where they conceded 34 points to an injured Joe Burrow, made him look like he was perfectly healthy. The next one that I definitely recall quite clearly, they gave up 31 points to a Baltimore Ravens team that could barely complete a forward pass that day for whatever reason. It was just all on the ground. Gus Edwards had 3 touchdowns or something absurd in that game. And your point, and then the 27-point conceding to Deshaun Watson was unbelievable as well. As we now know, Deshaun Watson had a realistically notable injury to his shoulder, played through it, and played quite well in that game, at least to the tune of getting them to 27 points. So, if that's the way that you're going to line up and play against the teams that need a get-right spot offensively, then you're going to look pretty bad. And I think that does set up well for the Steelers. To your point about the 3 threats, interesting to note, the 3 best plays for the Steelers on Sunday were all third downs. They were all passes, and it was to one of each of those players. The best play of 3rd and 8 in the fourth quarter. You had a 43-yard pickup between Kenny Pickett and George Pickens. The 29-yard pass to Pat Fryermuth in the the first quarter was huge for them in terms of keeping that drive going at 3rd and 13. And then the second quarter, 3rd and 3 pass between Kenny Pickett and Deontay Johnson for 39 yards. Like those, the fact that you had 3 explosive pass plays, that's something worth watching.
Yep, agreed. Okay, let's get to a game where there will probably not be as many explosive pass plays in Panthers-Bucs. But firstly, Drew, it's a career first for Patrick Mahomes on Sunday Night Football. The reigning MVP will travel to Lambeau Field for the first time in his career when he takes on Jordan Love and the Packers. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. All right, Carolina, Tampa Bay, showdown in my favorite division in football, the glorious NFC South. The Bucs are 5.5-point favorites The total is 37. Frank Reich is gone mercilessly. The Panthers at 1-10, finally saying goodbye to Frank. Do you think there is any way into this game? Do you think the Panthers will be improved or different without Reich? What are you expecting here?
Yeah, I think considering and contemplating this on the look ahead, and when we saw an open before we knew the Frank Reich firing took place, I had an appetite for Panthers. I thought the adjustment was pretty aggressive. Definitely the Buccaneers' injuries on defense seemed to matter last week. And then you get word that Baker Mayfield was getting an MRI on his ankle, and you're like, oh boy, this team's landed 6 points, and this might be the Kyle Trask show. Let's give this some serious consideration here. And ultimately, it looks like Baker's going to go. It looks like the Bucs are going to be a little bit healthier defensively here, and I think that definitely should matter against the Panthers team that is playing fine defensive football right now, but really still cannot get out of their own way on offense. It's worth recounting that the Panthers went from Frank Reich as the play caller to Thomas Brown for a hot second before Frank Reich took the play calls back, and now presumably this is somehow Jim Caldwell's responsibility to coordinate the offense. There have been more players let go, coaches let go, including Josh McCown, and I mean it's a pretty clear disaster in terms of what you're trying to do in developing a young quarterback in Bryce Young, who's having a horrible season so far. So at this point, I would look under potentially, and it's going to depend on the Buccaneers defensive injury report. I do think the Panthers have gotten some pretty important pieces kind of in the queue to return in the secondary, in particular with J.C. Horn and Jimmy Chin potentially coming back. And, their defense overall has played better out of the bye, I think. And, not great, obviously, but good enough to hold Baker Mayfield and company to 20-ish points. That seems reasonable. So under 37.5 is probably going to be the way I attack this one, but I need to get some information on Buccaneers, some of the key defensive secondary players and their health. Jamel Dean is kind of the top of the list.
Yeah. No, they certainly have. I mean, we forget now, but I mean, that game against Dallas was 17-10 in the second half. They didn't let that entirely get out of control until a bit later. I mean, they did beat Houston, which now looks like a much better win in retrospect relative to how Houston were considered at the time. The Bears are improved until, it's Tyson Bagent. It's not a great performance to lose to Tyson Bagent in any scenario, but I do think they have looked a little bit better out of the bye. And I thought Bryce Young, he wasn't good against Tennessee, but I thought he did look a little bit better, just mainly with his ability to scramble. Maybe that's what he needs to do more of to unlock something in this offense. But yeah, it's not a particularly inspiring team at the moment. The advice I would offer Dave Tepper is just never say CJ Stroud's name. Just do not say it, because he gave this press conference where he's talking about how the buck stops with me with not taking CJ Stroud effectively. It's like, Bryce Young's still on your team. You just used the number one pick on him. Stop talking about CJ Stroud. It doesn't do anything to utter that man's name aloud. It's just going to continue to break your team. Yeah. But I do think with the coaching change, maybe it will, when stuff like this happens, I think it just naturally creates more variance, because it's just, it's an altered ecosystem. And so I think with props in particular, that can help. So stuff like, I've been eyeing off Jonathan Mingo for 2 months now, because this guy is a starting wide receiver in the NFL, and he plays all of the snaps, and his receiving yards are always set at 28.5. It's can a starting wide receiver really be set at 28.5 when he plays all the snaps and his team is losing all the time and he's always in positive game script? And I think he's gone under 7 of the 10 weeks, and he can go under because Bryce Young has just been terrible. But it's stuff like that. Are they going to actually use Mingo a bit more now after he did have a good game last week and Thielen did nothing? So that's the type of stuff that I would target, alternate overs on Jonathan Mingo and that type of thing. We don't have references out in the market, but I suspect that kind of stuff will open a little bit low. Anything else on this game?
Well, I'd like to kind of comment on your note about the Tepper press conference, which was just a hot mess in all respects. You go out there after firing another coach, you absolutely have to own the bad decisions on the coaching, not the quarterback. Like that was exactly the wrong kind of tactical approach about how you wanted to communicate to your team and the world who you're going to try to now find another coaching candidate to develop this player. Like he needed to be very clear. This is on me for the decision making I did in terms of putting the coaching staff together. Like you're going to pay Frank Reich. You can absolutely throw him under the bus and own your decision to hire him as a mistake. Like you need to now kind of very clearly send a message to any potential candidate that you understand and will have learned from your mistakes in the coach hiring process. And next guy's going to be around for 10 years and blah, blah, blah. And you definitely did not need to continue to chip away at the confidence of Bryce Young. That was pretty poor decision-making. I just want to kind of push back on one other thing because I just surprised by it, but Panthers aren't even the worst offense in the NFL. Jets and the Giants have that clear distinction so far. And Patriots knocking on the door, Raiders knocking on the door, weirdly. Browns kind of in the mix there. There's a lot of bad offenses in the NFL. That said, the Panthers have only had 3 weeks this year where they have generated positive EPA as an offense. Week 3 against the Seahawks, week 5 against the Lions, and week 6 against the Miami Dolphins, who, of course, are not in their current state in terms of healthy bodies. So that's 3 weeks that were a while ago. And yeah, maybe the results are looking a little bit better, but I think it's because the defense. I don't think it's because the offense. And I really don't know how you explain how poorly, they played overall against Tennessee last week. That was Tennessee does not look like they're trying to win games to me. So the fact that they lost that one was pretty.
That game was an abomination. Titans, Panthers, zero compelling about it at all. And I agree. Tennessee are home dogs to the Colts, who are likely missing Jonathan Taylor and aren't very good in the first place. So that's where they're at.
There was one thing compelling about that game. There was a lot of the pre-draft process where it was bandied about who of these 4 quarterbacks is the best future pro.
Right.
2 of the 4 were Bryce Young and Will Levis, and holding them up to CJ Stroud in the way he has performed so far this year is not close.
No, it's not good at all. I mean, Levis has looked better than Young. I don't think Levis hasn't looked great. I mean, he looked fantastic that first game and a half, and then since then it's not been very good for Will Levis. The Bucs game was ugly. I thought he's a little bit better against the Panthers, albeit not going up against much. All right, before we get to a suddenly super compelling Broncos at Texans game, Drew, if you want more Formula One after the recent Grand Prix in Vegas, check out CNBC's special podcast series, Inside Track, the business of Formula One. An inside look at what's fueling F1's popularity and who is profiting. Hear from the biggest names in the game, the league's CEOs, and the $1 million packages rolled out for the most elite fans. You can listen by following the Squawk on the Street podcast, wherever you download and subscribe. All right. I am subscribing, Drew, to the Houston Texans, who are 3.5-point favorites home to Denver. The total is 47. I'm not sure I'm subscribing to them at -3.5. We'll get to that. What is interesting to me about this, and I understand that, a team's rating fluctuates week to week, and there are other factors like rest and travel, obviously, but it's interesting trying to reconcile, even with that, the fact that the Texans are 3.5-point favorites home to the Broncos, after being 1.5-point dogs home to Jacksonville, which seems like a massive gap between Jacksonville and Denver. So how do you think that works? Do you think that the Jags are just really, really good and super respected by the market, or do you think that the market believes that the Broncos are just fake?
Definitely the latter.
Yes.
I think the Texans opener at 3 left a lot of people who were pro-Texans a little bit cool. Like, oh, not going to get a 2.5 here. We're going to have to lay 3 if we want to back Stroud this week. That's kind of a bummer. But then there are other bettors in the space who have been desperately waiting for an opportunity to bet against the Broncos, and a spot on the road against an elite quarterback is one of those opportunities. And so that's why you saw an influx of Texans money pushed it to 3.5, because this is not a trivial move whatsoever. This was, somewhat This is professionally influenced, obviously. And I get it. I agree with it. I think there are still ways to attack this particular market if you believe that the Broncos are a sell high right now. Here's what I really have trouble squaring. And I know that the offensive generic points favored, defensive generic points favored on unpredictable are not an exact science. But it's at least a systematic process the way they come up with these. They right now have the Broncos as the 16th best offense in the NFL, which I find to be wildly inaccurate. And they have them as the 24th best defense, which I also think is wrong. I think the Broncos defense is what's carrying this unit. That's flipped. Yeah, exactly. And so that should open up a door here for an under 47 potentially. The thing about the Broncos defense only reason I haven't played it, only reason I haven't taken any action on this game yet, is the Texans have so many different weapons they can hurt you with. They don't rely on a Justin Jefferson game breaker type, right? Like they can hurt you in multiple different ways. Sometimes it's you don't really know where it's coming from. And the Broncos really have Patrick Surtain who can take away your Garrett Wilson, take away your Justin Jefferson, right? And then, go beat us with your second, third, and fourth options. And if that's what the Texans are asked to do in this game and do it without Nico Collins, for instance, I think they could probably do it. So I get it. Texans should be favored here. This is a sell high on the Broncos as a team that has been, they have been gifted some of the most phenomenally positive field positions and turnover luck in the last 6 weeks. And that's not sustainable. We know this through and through, that fumble luck is not something you can count on week over week, year over year. And I think this is people looking for an opportunity to capitalize on that because, outside of the fumble luck and the field position stuff, the Broncos have just been kicking field goals.
Yeah. And I think it's just a bizarrely conservative offense at the moment. Thinking back particularly to that game at Buffalo where they just refused to give the ball to Russell Wilson. They were content just to run the ball into the line with Javonte Williams. And I think a lot of these results in retrospect, well, some of them, like only beating Minnesota by 1 and looking at how Josh Dobbs looked against the Bears and what he was able to do for large chunks of that game against Denver. Like, I think this defense is fine and respectable, but I don't think it's a top 10 unit. And I think the offense is clearly below average. And to me, I think this is the market maybe for the first time really just acknowledging exactly how good Stroud is. And I think I was probably a little bit slow coming around to Stroud, maybe because I just watched a lot of Baltimore-Houston in week 1 where Stroud just wasn't very good at all, but his first game of his career against the Ravens defense. And now, I think the best quarterback in the NFL is Patrick Mahomes. I think the second best quarterback is Josh Allen. If we take Burrow out with his injury, I'm not sure anyone else is demonstrably better than CJ Stroud the way he's playing at the moment. Just his release. In the AFC. Well, you want to talk Brock Purdy? I'm just talking about who's the best. Yeah, Purdy's having a better season.
Okay.
Having a better season, but just in terms of if I could have a quarterback, just context independent in a game tomorrow.
Okay.
Like it would be, and I'm not saying that Stroud is, substantially better than Jalen Hurts or Prescott or Lamar. I'm just saying I think he's in that kind of zone now.
Okay.
He's the way he's playing, the release, the accuracy, the way he's scrambling at the moment. The scrambling is the thing. And he never really did that at Ohio State outside of the game against Georgia where it kind of changed the game a little bit, his scrambling ability. But the fact that he's kind of weaving that in now and he's really quick and it's kind of Mahomes-esque in a way, the way he does scramble. Do you think it's unreasonable to have Stroud kind of as a top 5 quarterback in the NFL?
No, I don't at all. And it cuts 2 ways when you are this young in your career, right? Like no one has really solved him yet.
Yeah.
And that could come. But he also is going to continue to learn and grow in the position. It's clear that the coaching staff didn't really know how to utilize him early in the season. Right. And if you're, this could be the stuff of, legend making, myth building, whatever. But, kind of giving him credit for going to the coaching staff and being like, hey, give me a shot here. More passing. Let's go. Take the training wheels off. Like if that's to be believed, like this guy's the guy you want to go to war with, certainly. And I think, even more so than just kind of looking at this particular matchup as, Russell Wilson. Oh my God, some of the tweets flying around about Russell Wilson. Like to say that he is overrated right now is like an understatement of the week. Like he is super, super overrated. That Bills game, they were up against a dead on arrival defense. They got 4 turnovers, managed 24 points. Like it was this run of success that they've had as a team winning their last 5 games, like it still is clearly to me a bottom 10 offense in the NFL, and Russell Wilson and the way that they are coaching him and what they're asking him to do, I think communicates a lot. Sean Payton's not an idiot. If he knew Russell Wilson was capable of going out there and being the guy, from 2018, he would ask him to do it, and he's not. And I think that says a lot. So CJ Stroud being clearly the better quarterback in this particular contest, I think is clear. And I very much hope he finds his way into the playoff mix, because I'd like to see him get some playoff experience and continue to grow and develop and evolve, because it makes for better and more entertaining football.
Yep. I think Wilson has gone from the 24th best quarterback in the league to like the 16th best quarterback in the league. Like, congratulations, Russ. You've got a $250 million contract.
And not because he went up, but because other guys have fallen apart.
Yeah. He's just been fine. Like, he's not actively hurting them. He's a slight positive, I think, overall. But yeah, the idea that Russ is bad, like they've confiscated the chef's hat. No one is letting Russ cook. This is very much Russ. You follow the recipe step by step. And if you try and do anything different, you're going in the naughty room. Like, he just doesn't get to do anything really in this offense. The other thing I'll say about Stroud, and the reason why he's probably not quite there with the absolute elite of the elite, is that he does take some bad sacks. And he took some really bad sacks against Jacksonville. Like, he got sacked 4 times for 43 yards. Like, that's a lot of yards to lose the sacks. And, that makes sense as a young quarterback. But yeah, he is someone who is going to be very short in MVP odds coming into the season for the next decade.
Yeah. Also, kind of worth noting that the Texans were right there in that game against the Jags. They did not get a favorable whistle. I know it's flags, but they did not get a favorable call on that game, and they were inches away from sending that thing to overtime. So, it was close. And in the same way that I get it, he does need a little bit more pocket awareness at end of game situations, especially. But the way that Josh Allen specifically leveled up at the end. This is Josh Allen, the pass rusher for the Jags. Like, that was actually more of the takeaway, I thought, than worrying about Stroud's ability to see and feel pro.
Yeah, no, he is something, and certainly didn't see this coming before the season. I mean, it's the greatest rookie season of all time. I would imagine. I haven't gone through every rookie season, but I can't imagine anyone has played at a higher level than Stroud, certainly at the quarterback position. So, yeah, he is the guy, and the market clearly respects him as a 3.5-point favorite now. Futures-wise, I don't think there's really a compelling way to bet these teams at the moment. I think that there's a lot of Sean Payton Coach of the Year buzz. We spoke about that a little bit earlier in the week. I just don't see it at all for Sean Payton. I mean, if he runs the slate, then I can get there, but I don't think he's going to run the slate. And if he even has one loss, the bubble gets deflated a little bit. And even for them to go 4-2 down the stretch would be quite difficult. Their schedule, even just the next 3 weeks, at Houston, at Los Angeles, the Chargers, at Detroit, and then they have another game against the Chargers. Like, they're going to be dogs in all of these games, and I think justifiably so. So I suspect what will happen is that Payton's just going to go 1-2 the next 3 weeks, and the Broncos will be kind of fighting for the edge of the playoffs. D'Amico, I don't really get it at the current price point now that the division is totally gone. He can absolutely still win without the division if he goes 11-6 or so, but to me, he is just like right back in the pool with guys like Steichen and even Sirianni and Tomlin and McDaniel and these guys who are probably just behind Dan Campbell. So I don't think there's much compelling on that front either. Do either Ryans, who's in the 4-1 range in the market, or Payton, like 15-1 range, are those compelling to you, or are you off them?
Yeah, I ran my season-long sims for the rest of the season.
Yeah.
I was blown away by the fat tail of the Texans winning out.
Okay. Interesting.
It is very real.
Yeah, I mean, I've got it just under 14-1, which is kind of stunningly short for a team that is 6-5 to go 6-0. But their schedule is incredibly easy, and they've got these breaks because they play Houston and the Jets. They play Cleveland and the Jets, and those games do not look nearly as imposing as they would have been even
Correct.
3 weeks ago, to be honest.
Yeah.
If it's going to be Tim Boyle, who is, I think, a pretty sizable downgrade from Zach Wilson, which is
Sizable.
Yeah. So and then they have these 2 games against Tennessee, which Tennessee might be like the 29th best team in the league at the moment.
Yeah.
So if they can get through this one, and I suspect they probably will, then all of a sudden, they're right back in the mix.
Yeah, and I mean, the fit, you can kind of sense it if they have that momentum heading into the playoffs as a 6 seed, even and without winning the AFC South. A 6-game winning streak, people are going to take notice.
Yep. I mean, I think a lot of different markets could come down to the last game of the season, which is Houston at Indianapolis. Like that could be winning in for the playoffs. It could be coach of the year ramifications around that. So again, who would have thought those 2 teams before the season have a compelling Week 18 matchup against each other? All right, we are done. Don't forget to check out NBCsports.com for more information to help you with your wagers. If you're listening to us in podcast form, don't forget to rate and subscribe. And a reminder to find all your favorite NBC Sports shows on Amazon Music. Just head to amazon.com/NBC Sports. From Jay Croucher and Drew Dinsick, we'll see you soon.